It was a bustling evening in the heart of the city where the golden lights of the high-end restaurant reflected off the polished marble floors. Jason, the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, sat confidently at the center of a grand table, surrounded by influential business partners and industry leaders. With his crisp suit and designer watch, he exuded the aura of someone who had mastered the art of success. He had built his company from the ground up, earning a reputation for being sharp-witted, decisive, and unapologetically ambitious. Jason knew how to command attention. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. That evening, however, he sought more than just business deals and praise. He wanted to prove, once again, that his intellect was unrivaled. The conversation around the table was lively as discussions of industry trends and the latest innovations swirled through the air. Jason was in his element, easily steering the conversation to topics that flattered his intelligence. He spoke passionately about the future of artificial intelligence and machine learning, showcasing his extensive knowledge and leaving little room for doubt that he was the smartest person in the room. As the night wore on and the main course was cleared away, the conversation took a natural turn toward languages. This was a subject Jason had always enjoyed bragging about, for he liked to think of himself as a polymath. He had traveled extensively for business and had picked up bits and pieces of various languages along the way. It wasn't uncommon for him to drop phrases in French, Spanish, or even Mandarin, depending on the situation. He was the first to tell anyone who would listen that he could understand almost any language, and his arrogance was clear when he spoke. It's incredible how many languages I can speak, Jason said, his voice oozing with pride. I've picked up a few here and there, and I can pretty much understand anything. In fact, if anyone were to try and speak something foreign here, I could translate it in a heartbeat. The group around the table laughed, clearly entertained by Jason's bravado. They admired his confidence, but there was a slight undercurrent of skepticism. It wasn't just his business acumen that made him a respected figure. It was his way of bending conversations to his will, ensuring that the spotlight never shifted away from him. Jason, pleased with the attention he was getting, leaned back in his chair, relishing the moment. From the edge of the room, amidst the clinking of silverware and light chatter, stood Malik. He had been the waiter serving their table throughout the evening, moving quietly between the guests, ensuring their needs were met. Malik was a young man in his late 20s, slender and focused, with an almost otherworldly grace. His sharp eyes caught every detail, and his movements were deliberate, making him seem like a part of the restaurant's rhythm. While Malik appeared to be just another employee, his background was anything but ordinary. A native of a small town, Malik had spent years studying languages, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. He had learned English, French, Italian, Spanish, and even some Japanese, all in his free time, dedicating himself to the art of translation. He had always known that he was destined for something greater than just serving food at a restaurant. But for now, he worked diligently to support his family, knowing that one day his skills would take him to places beyond this dining room. As Jason continued to boast, Malik couldn't help but overhear the conversation. He admired the CEO's confidence, but knew better than to buy into the claim that Jason could understand every language. Despite his admiration for languages, Malik had learned the hard way that people often exaggerated their abilities, especially when they thought they were untouchable. The arrogance in Jason's voice, the way he talked about himself, as if he were some kind of linguistic savant, irked Malik. He didn't mind people being proud of their accomplishments, but there was something about Jason's demeanor that rubbed him the wrong way. Malik continued his duties, refilling glasses of wine and clearing empty plates, but something shifted within him as Jason's boasting grew louder. The CEO's words grew more absurd, and Malik felt his patience wearing thin. It wasn't that he didn't respect the accomplishments of others, but Jason's casual dismissal of language as just a tool to be mastered seemed to undermine everything Malik had worked for. That was when, from the corner of his eye, Malik noticed Jason glance toward him, a smug grin creeping across his face. "Hey, you!" Jason called out, breaking the flow of conversation and sending a ripple of silence through the table. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the CEO, unsure of what was coming next. Jason leaned forward, his voice dripping with challenge. "If you're so smart, then translate this for me." Malik paused, his heart racing. He was caught off guard by the sudden challenge, and his mind raced to figure out what Jason had in mind. But he wasn't about to back down. Despite the tension rising in the air, Malik knew this was his moment. He stepped closer to the table, making sure his movements were steady. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice calm and respectful. Jason pointed to a menu card that had been placed on the table, its elegant font written in a combination of French and Italian. "Translate this for me. All of it. If you're as smart as you think, I want to see you do it." The room fell into complete silence. All eyes turned to Malik, and he could feel the weight of their gazes upon him. It was as though the entire room had suddenly turned into a stage, with Jason playing the role of the arrogant, self-assured leader and Malik cast as the humble waiter about to be humiliated in front of everyone. But Malik didn't flinch. He was no stranger to pressure. He had grown up in a world where his intelligence often went unnoticed, where his passion for languages was seen as a mere hobby rather than a skill. This was his moment to prove himself, not just to Jason, but to everyone in the room. "Of course, sir. Just give me a moment," Malik replied, his voice steady and composed. He bent over the menu, scanning the text with the precision of someone who had spent countless hours poring over books and studying dialects. His eyes moved rapidly, his mind processing each word, each sentence with the ease of someone who is fluent in both languages. French and Italian, two languages that Jason had boasted about understanding, were second nature to Malik. He worked through the text, translating the intricate descriptions of wines, dishes, and ingredients into perfect English. As he worked, Jason's smug expression began to falter. The more Malik translated, the more he realized that this wasn't some ordinary waiter. Malik wasn't just knowledgeable, he was exceptional. The ease with which Malik translated the menu left Jason in stunned silence. He had expected a mistake, a stumble, something, anything, to prove that the waiter wasn't as clever as he claimed, but there was nothing. Malik's translations were flawless, his understanding of both the language and the culture behind them evident in every word. With a final glance, Malik handed the menu back to Jason, his face neutral but confident. "That's exactly what it says. All of it," he said, his voice respectful but unwavering. Jason stared at him, his mouth slightly agape. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He had expected a challenge, perhaps even an awkward moment of miscommunication, but what he got was a flawless translation. The room, once filled with the clatter of conversation and laughter, fell silent. The atmosphere had shifted, and Jason's arrogance was quickly unraveling. He had been put in his place. You really know all that?" Jason stuttered, his confidence now replaced by something far less certain. The other guests at the table turned their attention to Malik, curiosity written on their faces. It was clear that Jason's earlier display of pride had taken a back seat to the quiet brilliance of the young waiter. The evening's events lingered in the air long after the final course had been served. Jason, the ever-confident CEO, no longer basked in the glow of his usual self-assuredness. The attention he had enjoyed moments before had shifted, leaving him to ponder the unexpected encounter with Malik, the young waiter who had quietly dismantled his facade of intellectual superiority. Jason, for all his success in the corporate world, was not used to being challenged so directly, especially not by someone who seemed to him so ordinary. But Malik had proven, in that brief moment, that intelligence wasn't confined to high-rise offices or corner suites. It could be found anywhere in any person, regardless of their occupation or social standing. As the final toasts were made and the last of the wine glasses were emptied, Jason couldn't shake the humbling feeling that had settled in his chest. He had come into the evening convinced of his own brilliance, but now he was forced to recognize the quiet wisdom of someone he had initially dismissed. The other guests had noticed the shift too. The once dynamic conversation had tapered off, replaced by an awkward quiet as Jason's bravado seemed to fade. Even the business partners who had once been so eager to bask in his knowledge now seemed hesitant, unsure how to navigate the new energy in the room. No one knew quite what to say after Malik's flawless translation had left them all momentarily speechless. Jason's earlier boasting now seemed out of place, and the realization hit him hard. This wasn't just a matter of being shown up, it was a reminder that no one was above learning something new, no matter their status. As the dinner wound down, the atmosphere became less charged with tension and more with reflection. Guests began to rise from the table, their conversations returning to polite exchanges, but it was clear that the evening's dynamic had shifted. Jason, now with a quiet intensity, watched as the others filed out of the restaurant, many offering nods of acknowledgement, but none speaking with the same exuberance they had before. He remained seated for a moment, contemplating the surprising turn of events. It was rare for anyone to leave such an impression on him, and it had unsettled him in a way he wasn't used to. He had been forced to confront his own ego, and the discomfort was palpable. After a few moments, he stood up, his mind still buzzing with thoughts about Malik. Jason hadn't planned on returning to the young waiter, but something about the situation tugged at him. He realized that despite his wealth and influence, there was a lesson in humility that he had failed to learn until that night. Maybe Malik wasn't just a waiter. Maybe he was something more, a reminder that intellect didn't have to be flashy to be profound. Malik was finishing his tasks, clearing the last of the plates and straightening the chairs, when Jason approached him. The young waiter paused, a bit surprised, as he wiped his hands on his apron. He had expected to be dismissed with a simple tip and a thank you, as usual. Instead, he saw the look in Jason's eyes, a blend of sincerity and thoughtfulness that had not been there earlier in the evening. "Hey, Malik," Jason began, his tone softer now, much less arrogant than before. "I owe you an apology." Malik looked up, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. The shift in Jason's voice was unmistakable. He had never heard the CEO speak with such humility before. Malik had spent enough time observing people in this business to know when someone was genuinely trying to make amends, and Jason's demeanor told him that this was one of those rare moments. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that," Jason continued, his words measured and sincere. "It was uncalled for. I shouldn't have done that." Malik paused, taking a moment to absorb Jason's words. He wasn't sure what had triggered this change in the CEO, but it was clear that something had shifted. His earlier experience with the arrogant CEO had left him with mixed feelings, but this was something different. He had expected Jason to dismiss the incident and move on, like so many other people of his stature would have. But Jason had taken a different route, one that required introspection and self-awareness. "Thank you for saying that," Malik replied with a smile, his tone warm yet measured. "But no hard feelings. It's part of the job, right? People challenge each other all the time." Jason nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in Malik's words. For the first time that evening, he found himself truly respecting the young man standing before him. Despite the initial discomfort, Malik had handled the situation with a grace that Jason hadn't anticipated. It was a rare quality in today's world, especially in a place where power dynamics often dictated how people interacted. There was a long pause between them as Jason mulled over his next words. Finally, after a brief silence, he extended his hand. "No, really. I respect what you did," he said. "I'm not often humbled, but you've taught me something tonight. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know until someone shows you." Malik's eyes widened slightly at the gesture. Jason's hand was firm, but there was a gentleness to it, a shift that spoke volumes. It was rare for someone of Jason's stature to admit they had learned something new, to admit they had been wrong in their assumptions. Malik wasn't sure what had changed, but he knew this moment was significant. He accepted Jason's hand with grace, his own firm grip a silent acknowledgement of the respect they were now offering one another. "I'm glad I could show you that," Malik said, his voice steady. Jason gave a small smile before withdrawing his hand, and for a moment, The two men simply stood there, as if allowing the weight of the conversation to settle between them. The tension that had been so thick earlier had dissipated, replaced by a mutual respect that neither of them had expected. Jason hesitated before speaking again. He said, his voice thoughtful, "I'm always looking for people with talent. How would you like to come work for my company? Maybe in a role that suits your abilities. You clearly have more skills than just being a waiter." Malik blinked in surprise. This wasn't something he had anticipated. He had always dreamed of using his linguistic skills in a professional setting, but he wasn't sure if Jason's offer was genuine or just an impulsive decision born out of guilt. Still, the idea of working in a corporate environment, using his talents in a more direct way, was tempting. But Malik had learned over the years that some opportunities, no matter how appealing, didn't always align with his values. "Thank you," Malik replied after a moment of contemplation. "But I'm happy where I am for now. It's not just about a title for me. It's about doing what I love. I love languages, but I also value the people I work with. This job, it's given me a chance to learn more about life, and that's something I'm not ready to give up." Jason smiled, nodding in understanding. "I get it," he said, "but if you ever change your mind, my door is always open." Malik nodded, appreciating the offer, but knowing in his heart that this was not his path. As Jason turned to leave, Malik watched him go, a sense of pride swelling within him. The evening had started with arrogance, but it had ended with a moment of mutual understanding. He had proven that true intelligence was not about showing off, it was about understanding, respect, and humility. As Jason walked out of the restaurant, Malik turned back to his duties. The night had been filled with unexpected twists, but it had also reminded him that sometimes the most valuable lessons came from the most unlikely places. Even the most powerful and arrogant people could be brought down a peg by humility, and Jason, for all his wealth and power, had learned that lesson from someone he had never expected to teach it.